Hello everyone. I don't need these on. We're gonna watch a couple videos, but I don't need those on. Hello everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for coming. I have a lot of tabs open, but not a lot of stories. The bulk of what I'm going to talk about tonight is all Epstein stuff. A lot of stuff has happened. I saved a ton of links. We're also going to get into the Georgia ballot seizure situation and some odd, interesting things about Tulsi Gabbard that I think are concerning. And then I have a couple of things about Gaza that I think are rather interesting and how that's been handled diplomatically, which I think is concerning. Which I think is both a Biden and a Trump problem. But housekeeping items first. Make sure to find me online, CameronJournal.com. Make sure to sign up for the Cameron Journal newsletter. It comes out every Saturday, and it's a wrap-up of the whole week. It's the interview, it's the show, it's the living joke. It is news commentary from me, plus a little greeting, all this type of thing. And you're going to want to subscribe now because there's some changes to the newsletter coming as I try to move towards monetizing things a little bit more. So there's going to be a free and paid version of the newsletter coming up, so you'll want to get in on the newsletter now. You can sign up in one of two places. You can go to CameronJournal.com/newsletter and sign up there, or you can go to CameronJournal.substack.com and sign up there. If you also want to support my journalism, you can go to my coffee, which is on Twitter. It's also in the newsletter, and give me a little tip. You'll see it in the newsletter when you subscribe. Or you can also join Cameron Journal Plus, which includes access to my private Discord server. As much as I'm very exhausted by the time I get done doing the news hour, I am going to start doing after news hour hangouts for Cameron Journal Plus subscribers only. So you either want to subscribe on Substack for the minimum monthly amount or Cameron Journal Plus to support the journalism, and I'm going to start putting that in YouTube videos and things like that, and trying to get more people excited about those things, because it is a lot of work to put all of this together. I read stuff constantly, and so it's a good thing. Yes, and then also make sure to find me on social media. I do lots of shorts, things like that. So at Cameron Cowan, everywhere except TikTok, which is at Cameron Journal. And make sure to watch along, because all the stuff that I do, interviews, all this type of thing, I'm doing shorts, we're posting about stuff. It's a lot of fun. Especially on Instagram, I have some new original content coming out. I'm working with an Instagram growth agency to do some custom videos for you guys, which I intended to shoot this evening before the news hour, and we're not going to do those till tomorrow. So it's good, a lot of fun. So let's not waste time, because we have a ton to talk about. So let me dive into the stories, and let me get rid of this, because we're still set for the living joke, and we're going to change this out, and we're going to do more Epstein files. There we go. And yeah, excellent. All right, and let's get a web browser. Whoa. Okay, we're not going to start with that story. We're going to start here. So although the investigation and everything in the United States has concluded, which is why the files are released to start with, this data dump has not stopped other countries from getting busy. The French are already busy going after Elon and X for their ties to the whole thing, but the Poles are not to be underestimated. You never should. It says here, the Polish Epstein files investigation has reached a fever pitch, with the focus shifting from general threats to specific organizations and individuals. In this video, this one way down here, Prime Minister Tusk warns that the KGB likely possesses material against many leaders still active today. Quote, an increasing number of commentators and experts assume that it is very probable that this was a premeditated operation by the Russian KGB. This so-called honey trap, and remember that because we're going to come back to that, a sweet bait, a trap set for the elites of the Western world, primarily the United States. I don't need to tell you how serious the implications for the security of the Polish state are regarding this possibility, an increasingly likely possibility, that Russian services co-organized this procedure, which can only mean one thing. They also possess compromising materials against many leaders who are still active today. The discovery of a 2011 visa application by Jeffrey Epstein has become the centerpiece of the KGB honey trap theory. It actually goes back farther. His first visa was issued in 2002. And he has applied several times to visit Russia since that time. It says that Epstein listed his travel purpose as a visit to MOO Vimpel, Interregional Public Organization of Vimpel Veterans. Vimpel, also known as Directorate V, was an elite top-secret KGB Special Forces unit founded in 1981. Unlike the Alpha Group, which focused on domestic counterterrorism, Vimpel was designed for foreign operations, including sabotage, deep cover intelligence, and liquidating high-value targets. That means killing, for those of you who have not watched this thriller film in the last 30 years. Prime Minister Tusk's team is investigating whether these veterans, many of whom transitioned into private security and influence roles after the USSR fell, provided the logistical backbone for Epstein's European operations. The theory suggests Epstein wasn't just a rogue criminal, but a front for a Russian state-sponsored blackmail machine. The task force is zeroing in on Daniel Amar Siad, the Swedish citizen of Berber Algerian origin, identified as a scout for Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel. Emails from 2009 confirm Siad told Epstein he would be, quote, scouting in small villages, unquote, across Poland, specifically naming Krakow, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. Local investigators are currently reviewing hotel and travel records from the summer of 2009. They are trying to verify his claim that he had several girls already waiting in Poland. Documents show Siad also sent Epstein photos of a Polish model he allegedly met in Dubai, suggesting a multi-layered international recruitment network. While the 3 million pages contain thousands of names, the compromat or blackmail section remains the most sensitive part of the investigation. Several Polish news outlets have been flagged for their coverage or lack thereof during the years Epstein was active. The investigation is looking into whether any editorial decisions were influenced by the threat of compromat. Justice Minister Waldemar Zurek's Analytical Investigative Group is holding its first full operational summit this week. Poland has formally requested that the US DOJ unseal files related to non-US nationals, which they believe contain the bulk of the evidence regarding Polish victims. This is going to keep going. This is the first in a long line of other countries trying to get their house in order, which also reinforces the thing I always said, is that the national security implications of all of this are huge. Huge. And now that this is coming out and there's still more to come and this is starting to happen, this is exactly what I was afraid of. And this is why I think there was hesitation from the Biden administration to get too into releasing files and all this type of thing, because it's this. This is the result of full transparency. Now, a lot of people would say, it's a small price to pay. Who cares? The Poles have their own country. They can do their own thing. Why does this matter? And it doesn't. I'm just saying that this is going to continue to be a massive problem for a lot of places moving forward. There'll be lots of subsequent international investigations into all of this, and this is not going away anytime soon. At all. And the more documents we get, there's more documents to go, the more this is going to continue on. And I promise this is not going to turn into the Epstein Files show. There are plenty of other important things to talk about, but we're still wading through all of this, and this is still, for better or for worse, incredibly important. Now, kind of bouncing off of this Russia connection, which I think is rather interesting. We have some more indication from these emails here that that there was definitely some conversations being had regarding sex and possibly blackmail, especially especially regarding interactions between people like Draper, Michael Caputo, and Viktor Yushchenko. And this also gets into the Masha Drakova side of this saga that kind of shows who were the people behind all of this. So it says here that Tim Draper, he met with a Russian puppet President Viktor Yushchenko, who was the president of Ukraine before Zelensky, and Michael Caputo in Ukraine. Caputo's a longtime Trump Stone friend and a known Russian asset who used to work for the Kremlin and was hired to Health and Human Services in 2020. He hired Masha Drakova as a publicist for one of his hedge funds. She was formerly the head of a pro-Putin youth movement similar to TPUSA. That's not a fair thing. TPUSA is not just a youth movement. It was a youth movement for Trump, but that was a long time ago. Anyway, details. Masha was also publicist for Jeffrey Epstein. Draper is a close business partner of Frank Krier, who's CEO of Draper's nonprofit. Krier used an elite-only sex club in Los Angeles to gather intel and blackmail club members, quote, similar to Jeffrey Epstein, unquote. Epstein used his financial contributions to a research lab at MIT, quote, as a means for gaining access to politicians and decision makers. And that part is always interesting because that also is the connection to Noam Chomsky, who's completely done after this. And it also is his connection to a lot of other media people who didn't necessarily know who Epstein was other than a big donor at MIT. So, this keeps going. Krier used Russian-led Q-Wave capital to funnel money into research projects like Epstein in order to gain access to politicians and decision-makers. Q-Wave, which Draper's company invested in, also employed Masha Drakova as a publicist. Draper is also associated with a convicted Chinese spy and the man who connected Bill Gates with Jeffrey Epstein. Tim Draper has used his Twitter account to support Trump and his policies, boost Bitcoin, spread COVID-19 vaccine conspiracy theories, and defend Elon Musk. He hasn't posted about Trump personally since June of last year, which leads us to believe he was not cleared to meet the president, or he didn't like the outcome of the meeting. Tim Draper likes to use the phrase, I fund rebellions. Looks to me like he's funding criminals. It's and it also gets into farther into the Masha Drakova thing, which we have another thing on. Tim Draper is an interesting figure. So Caputo, it is all of, there's a very interesting, this is very similar. It reminds me honestly of the Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Ukraine, Russia thing. This is operating in a very similar way. And we have obviously the reference emails, talks about Draper, Caputo, Yushchenko, Masha Drakova, and here's where it talks about directly about the Draper had Frank Will Careers, who's a nonprofit organization. Career was an active member of a private high-end, high-initiation fee sex swingers club in Los Angeles, Northern California, called Sanctum, and collected information on members of Sanctum for the purposes of blackmail, similar to Jeffrey Epstein. Career actively blackmailed fellow DFJ Capital Managing Director Steve Jurvetson. Yeah, it keeps going deeper and deeper and more odd. In terms of the connections just keep going and going and going in very odd directions. This meme is funny, but the story down here really is and I only kept this in because it's rather entertaining and we could use some levity. Jeffrey Epstein was using World of Warcraft currency to launder money and was interested in in-game currency. This makes his ban and association more interesting as he was involved in World of Warcraft gold farming and real money trading through a Chinese gold farm. And it goes into Bannon being a World of Warcraft gold seller, and oh, at the time, people had mentioned that WoW should stop people from mining gold and selling it on their platform, which I think they eventually did restrict, but didn't for a long, long time. And companies were talking about that, and so it is kind of even like a weird Gamergate connection. There's an email elsewhere. I don't think I have it in my stack. There's an email elsewhere where Epstein talks about like having more microtransactions in games, sort of thing. And it even also says here that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and right-wing UK politician Nigel Farage dangling from his puppet strings. Epstein, in turn, waxed grandiose of, quote, 20,000 hackers showing up at the same place. They will be sharing ideas on hacking, crypto exchanges, voting booths, medical records, crypto wallets, which piqued Bannon's interest. But as Garbage Day points out, this doesn't mean Epstein, first and foremost a career scuzzball, and Bannon, who flunked out of the White House during Trump's first term and became a briefly imprisoned podcaster, were responsible for any of what was to come. It is a very odd, odd thing. Um, and it is kind of a fun, connection to be kind of like World of Warcraft fails to regulate in-game economies, leading to gold selling. Steve Bannon makes a lot of money gold selling. Global fascist movement. It is an interesting thing how the things that people are involved in and the things that kind of tie people together. Again, this isn't really newsworthy. I just thought it was funny and we could use some levity. This one, and it was funny because I was just having this conversation as we were leading up to as I was getting ready to sit down to do the news hour. We're not going to have any prosecutions from this, at least in America, most likely. The standard of evidence is simply too high. It is, where I'm going to change the graphic real quick. No, Epstein prosecute, because we're going to stay on this for a little bit. The standard of evidence in the U.S. is just simply far too high for evidence that is a lot of tips, a lot of conjecture, a lot of circumstantial evidence. The good stuff that proves anything is in Tel Aviv and Moscow. If the DOJ has it, they're not going to release it. If they did, it would be prosecutable, but they would also have to be submitted to discovery and scrutiny and all of this. There's all of that is on the table, and that makes these things incredibly difficult to prosecute. That's the reason Ghislaine only got, I think, 3 charges in 10 years. Epstein's first prosecution way back in 2008 was like 1 charge, and that's how he got a sweetheart deal. And here, Todd Blanche says right out now, we're not going to prosecute the predators in the Epstein files, and we're not going to release their names to the public. Let's watch.
Thank you. You said this is the end of the Epstein, of your review of the Epstein files. So just to clarify, is the public going to learn the identities of the men who abused the girls with the information that you're releasing? And if not, why not? And then I have a quick follow-up.
I mean, you just baked in an assumption into your question that I have never said and I don't know to be true. Is the public going to learn about men that abuse these girls? Like, what does that mean? I mean, I don't understand what that means.
Well, I mean, they're the men who abused the young women through Epstein's.
Look, we said in July, and it remains as true today as it was in July. If we had information, we meaning the Department of Justice, about men who abused women, we would prosecute them, right? We talked about the work that we're doing. That's why I said that. I said this earlier. There's this built-in assumption that somehow there's this hidden tranche of information of men that we know about that we're covering up or that we're choosing not to prosecute. That is not the case. I don't know whether there are men out there that abuse these women.
And that's the I think the crux of the problem and the crux of the issue is what information is known is around a few people with whom we have emails, we have tips, we have conjecture, but we don't have a ton of evidence. We don't know who all Epstein's clients were. We know some because he chatted with them, but we don't know who else. Now, other investigations in other countries may reveal that information to us, and it may get very hard for some people to travel as Interpol warrants are out and all this sort of thing. But, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that there's not any prosecutions because the standard of evidence in federal court is quite high. And the reality is the bulk of this is emails, it's tips, it's written evidence, it's very, very little of anything that can be actionable in a court of law. The good stuff is already elsewhere. What we have here really is the revealing of people working together for an ideological and agenda-based outcome, and for some reason it also involves sex trafficking. I was telling someone over the weekend, I can handle the you want to take over the world thing. Like, okay, you and Peter Thiel and Steve Bannon, you want to take over the world. Fine, okay, that's unnecessary and dumb, but okay, bro, whatever. All right, we're gonna take over the world. Do we need to abuse underage girls while we do it? I feel like taking over the world's enough, don't you? I feel like if I'm Epstein and Bannon and all these people, I'm taking over the world. I don't need to also be involved in sex trafficking or cannibalism or all the insane things that have come out in recent days. Do we need to do Gamergate, Pizzagate, this thing, that thing? Isn't the take over the world part supposed to be the story? Like, I feel like we could have left everything else, but we all know why that was not necessarily the case. And that has to do with what Epstein's real business was. And that was, one, he was in the business of peddling flesh, and two, he was in the business of selling the information about the peddled flesh to concerned governments. We know at least two of them, Israel and Russia, were concerned parties and clients with whom he was selling this information. Now, that was unfortunately the lever they used to use this compromising information to serve somebody's agenda. Now, it appears that Epstein didn't really have an agenda of his own. He was just an information broker, basically, a glorified information broker. Other people in his circle certainly had a certain agenda, and he certainly agreed with some of it, wanted and participated in some of it. But that was his main business, and to me, that's frightening enough. I think trying to have mass prosecutions of people for all of this, one, it would be nice if we could do that, because it would bring justice to the victims, what little justice we can offer them. We cannot undo what happened to them. But the evidence, there's not a lot of great evidence here. It's a lot of circumstantial conjecture. That's what it is. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure there are other people with, great channels like Legal Mindset and Legal Eagle who are happy to dig in and dive into this from a legal perspective and help us understand why this isn't happening. But if you're wondering when the prosecutions are going to start, Todd Blanche has told you it's not going to happen, and we're not going to be releasing some big list of names to the public. This is not. There's so much about Epstein that's gotten built up. There's so much anticipation. There's so many memes and sayings, and everybody thinks it's going to, and it's not. And if anything, this is a big lesson in all of this stuff. Typically, ordinarily, the reality of something is much less exciting than the story that's being told about it, most of the time. And that this is another case of that. Now, it's already shocking enough that we have a group of men who are trying to, take over the world sort of thing, and we're going to get into Zuckerberg and all that in a minute. Take over the world. It's bad enough that there's sex trafficking and all this sort of thing. It's bad enough that it's connected to every single thing on the internet for the last 20 years, mostly because Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were the people posting it. That's all one thing. But a court of law is still a court of law. And the reality is we don't have a lot of great evidence here. And that, unfortunately, means people who should be getting prosecuted probably won't. It's a very sad thing, but it's also important to understand how the system works. Now, that might be cause for reform, but given how oftentimes government can fly off the handle and destroy people's lives for no good reason, we may want to be very careful before we do that. I also want to get into briefly this that I came across today, actually, is that there was apparently an issue with Trump's DOJ refused to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico ranch where children were taken advantage of and trafficked. It says, this is an email here that confirms prosecutors likely never searched Jeffrey Epstein's ranch in New Mexico. It says here, we don't know who this email is from, but it's from the files. it says here, oh, this is from 2019 JE Estate Meeting. We're not exactly sure what our ability is to provide the trustees what is effectively discovery in a now defunct criminal case against Epstein himself. That said, I can convey that we did produce to defense counsel detailed search warrant returns in connection with the New York property. Perhaps you would be able to obtain those from Epstein's criminal defense counsel. In particular, I believe what you're looking for would especially be in list some numbers. It will also review the status of the search warrant return with respect to the island property. We have not yet searched the New Mexico property, and hope this is useful in the interim. Separately, I've conveyed your request for a meeting to discuss the possibility of resolving the government's potential forfeiture claims, and I haven't yet gotten a response to relay, but I will let you know as soon as I do, and will provide those dates in connection with your request. So, we don't know what happened to the ranch or the search, and at this point, there's been enough time. Whatever was there has long been gone and destroyed, and all this sort of thing. Um, and although this person says the ranch wasn't sold until 2023, so I was it never investigated, and if the Democrats weren't controlled opposition, wouldn't they seek to dig up Trump's golf course after the recent Epstein revelations? They both maliciously fumbled this so horribly on purpose. Um, yeah, it's a quite. I love Aaron Parnas, but it's a quite interesting thing to not go and search that ranch, at least as of December 2019 after his death. It should have been seized immediately, before anything got too far, or was destroyed. And now, of course, it's been so many years, and as someone pointed out, it wasn't sold till 2023. So any chance to have that evidence is long gone. It just gets worse and worse, and it's interesting that investigation was not undertaken. But it's it just gets it just gets worse and worse. I want to stop by this story for a moment, because this gets more into the plot to take over the world portion of our of the conversation. Oh, here we go. There we go. And I've been following this Substack writer on Twitter for a little while now, and he is called Mind War, and the psychological war on democracy, and is the treachery of the elites. This is the Epstein class, how a single meeting compromised the American oligarchy. The infamous picture of who's here? Mark Zuckerberg, Epstein, Elon Musk, several other people. But most importantly, Sergei Belyakov, an FSB-trained former deputy minister of economic development for the Russian Federation, who worked under Kirill Dmitriev, currently Putin's chief negotiator on Ukraine and CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. Belyakov was also an associate of Jeffrey Epstein, who helped Epstein navigate through the Russian bureaucracy, secure visas, and obtain introductions to senior Russian officials. Epstein had Russian visas issued nearly every year going back to 2002, including a 2011 visa sponsored by a group associated with Vimpel, a secretive elite arm of the FSB, associated with covert operations abroad, including assassinations. Belyakov also acted as a kind of a Russian fixer for Epstein, including an incident in July 2015 when Epstein asked for help with a Russian girl from Moscow who was blackmailing his rich New York friends. Suggestions. It says she's attempting to blackmail a group of powerful businessmen in New York. It's bad for business for everyone involved. She arrived in New York Saturday of last week, staying at the Four Seasons on 57th Street. Suggestions. Epstein's request came in 2 weeks after Palantir founder Peter Thiel met alone with Belyakov in New York City at Epstein's urging. Thiel and Epstein had ongoing contact by email, phone, and in-person meetings from 2012 until Epstein's arrest 7 years later. On 7/10/15, the day after Thiel met Belyakov, Epstein emailed Thiel to ask how it went. Thiel said, "Fine. They wanted me to come to Moscow. Not sure if I can do that." 3 weeks later, on 8/3/15, there was an extraordinary secret meeting between several oligarchs currently on track to worth trillions of dollars and effectively control the federal government, including Thiel, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, and Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeffrey Epstein. And we have the receipts. Sergey let me, and then this is the photo, the infamous photo. See, here's them saying Peter Thiel, fine, they wanted me to come to Moscow, not sure if I can do that. Quantum computing people at ranch, some presidents next week. See too much more interesting than an annoying girl next to you at dinner. How long are you here for? All this sort of thing. And then he emailed this photo to himself from himself. on August 3rd, 2015, and you can kind of see everybody in here. Now, obviously, Epstein wanted this memorialized elsewhere, not just on his camera reel on his phone. He wanted this somewhere he could keep it, use it, and have it handy. And it apparently, it was probably rather covertly, because no one's looking at the camera. I don't think anyone knows that photo was taking place. And while Epstein and the oligarchs may not have gone to the meeting to discuss the best way to dismantle the post-World War II world order, topple American democracy, and enslave us all through a techno-fascist surveillance state, that is nevertheless their current trajectory. Therefore, knowing how this meeting metastasized into the current national and global crisis is crucial to setting the world back on its axis if we ever can. An example of why we must not ignore this history anymore is currently being reported by Zelensky himself that Donald Trump is being sold a package of $12 trillion worth of economic cooperation by Kirill Dmitriev, Sergei Belyakov's old boss. Ukrainian intelligence showed me the so-called Dmitriev package that he had presented to the U.S. The volume there is about $12 trillion. This is supposedly a package of economic cooperation between America and Russia. That is, we hear about the probability of such or similar bilateral documents between America and Russia. Note that $12 trillion is almost 6 times the gross domestic product of Russia. It's absurd to think Putin could offer Trump anything like that. And besides being an instantly impeachable offense, entertaining a deal like this smacks of an old man being conned by a timeshare salesman. And this goes on. We're not going to get into the RNC and all that type of thing. But it is fascinating to see and understand some of this. I've been talking with the writer, Jim Swartz, and we've been going back and forth on Twitter a little bit. This gets into the, okay, we want to take over the world part. Lovely. I think the Russian connections are interesting. However, and I will always remind people, as much as we talk about Russia, the plane always stops in Tel Aviv first. Always stops in Tel Aviv first. The stuff with him and Ehud Barak and the interactions he had with Mossad and Israeli intelligence government officials is as deep, if not deeper, than anything Epstein did with Russia. It's both. And we need to comprehend it's both. It's both. So if you're a MAGA person and is like, oh God, Russia, it is Russia, but it's also Israel, Mossad. Like, it's both things. Both were clients of Epstein. Epstein was in contact with all of these people. Again, the national security implications of everything here is absolutely huge. War is not on the table. And that's something that should be frightening to anyone within the sound of my voice. Now, this is a fun thread I want to stop by and read. Because it's an interesting place about government, our thoughts on government, our thoughts on society, all this type of thing. And it's a nice breather from Jeffrey Epstein. We have a little bit more Epstein coming up. Not that one, actually. We'll get into Ossoff and some of these other stories. But it is interesting when it says, and I hadn't thought about it this way. I'd heard some of these things, but I hadn't thought about it this way. It says here, Trump, too, has inadvertently exposed a surprising truth. The federal government kind of knows what it's doing. It's why Doge failed to find much waste, fraud, or abuse, and why ICE has to round up 5-year-olds. There aren't roving bands of violent illegals menacing our communities. It puts the lie to decades of bullshit GOP talking points, but in order to keep them alive, policy disagreements morphed into waste, like USAID, and random crimes have to be elevated into smears against entire communities. When little old ladies can't call the Social Security hotline or tax returns aren't processed, people notice. When you're not arresting murderous gang members and instead rounding up a kid wearing a Spider-Man backpack, it puts the lie out to the whole enterprise. But your run-of-the-mill Republican voter can't admit that government works. They've been spoon-fed the exact opposite narrative their whole lives, and to acknowledge you were lied to is a bridge too far for them. The doom loop we're in will only be solved when Republican voters make Republican politicians pay for this by voting them out of office, clicking off the right-wing media, and cutting off money to Republican candidates. The end. I liked this. His statements on ICE are not quite true. ICE has done a pretty good job of rounding up criminals, and there was a criminal migrant problem in certain places. they're not handling it well. They're not doing it the right way. They are causing a mess of the whole thing. There's some factual issues with that. However, I'm and I did this story on the show. I always love and enjoy, like, one of the Doge kids came and said, like, yeah, we didn't really find much waste, fraud, and abuse. Government actually does kind of work and whatnot. The point of Doge was never about government waste as such. The point of Doge was to live the Republican dream they have wanted to do since FDR, and that is government should do as little as possible for people. Government should not spend money on people. Government should not invest in society. That is for private people and private markets, and if you cannot afford to live and exist in a society set up this way, then you should just die because you don't have enough money. Now, the reality is when government spends money well and invests in this country, we end up doing very, very well, i.e. interstates, the Transcontinental Railroad, all this type of thing. Big infrastructure projects can pay off. And also, when government sets up, creates education opportunities and housing opportunities, people take advantage of them, and they do really well. I did an interview earlier today with neoclassical economist Steve Keen, and he and I were talking about economics in the 20th and 21st century, and we were talking about, how this sort of long-term government austerity leaves us poorer, sadder, and more miserable, because the reality is we do need government to take on big risky things that don't really make a lot of money. And the reality is a lot of these, programs that we have created, all this type of thing, are more efficient than we maybe necessarily thought. But the reality is, and I know this from working in Republican politics, it's not that these programs need to be improved or that they're, that they're that inefficient or that wasteful. Not that we can't find waste, fraud, and abuse around, particularly at the state level, given what's happening in Minnesota. Several videos about that. It's not that those things don't exist, but it's usually not nearly as bad as being said, because what was being said was never based in any sort of fact or reality. It was the problem wasn't the money. The problem was that it was happening at all. And that's been a main part of the GOP talking points since at least 94 with Newt Gingrich. And he lived in a legacy that had started under Reagan, who had lived in a legacy that was really started by Barry Goldwater in 1964, that goes back to the Federalist Society and the John Birch Society. If you want to have some fun, go look into those two things. One of these days I'll do a video on those, but for now you'll have to Google in the meantime. And this has been the long-term goal. Doge was the wet dream of the Republican Party since 1952. That's the wet dream of the Republican Party since Barry Goldwater, is just get rid of all of it. Government shouldn't be doing it. Waste taxpayer dollars. Chuck it. And we have chucked a lot of government out the window. We haven't necessarily... Now, people will say, well, look around. Everything seems fine. All this type of thing. Everything seems to be moving forward. Things aren't falling apart. And I would say yes, but the opportunity to make them meaningful better has also gone. And we haven't even really dialed down the deficit that much. We haven't even really solved debt that much. We unemployed a lot of people, so I guess there's some cost savings there. We have managed to adversely impact people in other countries, but the median voter is going to look and say, why should we be paying for birth control in Pakistan? Why should we be paying for all of these things, all these other places? All of us work hard and we end up paying a lot in tax for what? And I understand that, certainly, especially when the roads are bad and the bridges fall down and you can't access healthcare and all this type of thing. I'm all for reinvesting in the welfare, in the welfare of people, but that also requires something very important that is currently not any part of GOP policy, and that is genuinely believing that government can do great things. Genuinely believing that government can be the solution to problems and that we can do great, wonderful, and amazing things when we all come together and do it through government. And that is something that is still just not in the not in the Republican lexicon by any stretch of the imagination. And unfortunately, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. And if you want insight to that, look at what's happened in Greece and the UK. A decade plus of austerity, and their societies are measurably worse. Measurably worse. What have they gained and what have they lost? Well, for the UK, they have been unable to keep a government in power, and they're out of the European Union, and cost of living is absolutely out of control, on top of their migrant problem. In Greece, it's been a decade of austerity. The country has practically fallen apart at the seams. All the public goods have been sold off, and the Greeks still work more hours than the Germans. But the German and French banks that invested in Greece did very well for themselves. It's the same cycle over and over and over and over again. This is the video from John Ossoff about the very unfortunate Obama post Trump post on Truth Social depicting the Obamas as monkeys. This is what John Ossoff, a senator of Georgia, had to say.
You're seeing what I'm seeing, right? The president posting about the Obamas like a Klansman at 1 a.m. You see our government transformed into a tool of one man's personal vengeance and power and enrichment. You see the president and his family rake in billions while Americans struggle to make ends meet. You see prices going up while jobs are getting harder to find. You see millions lose insurance and local hospitals shut services while the rich get tax cuts. You see masked federal agents kicking down doors without so much as a warrant from a judge, dragging Americans out of their homes without cause, demanding papers at police checkpoints, assaulting and even killing Americans with impunity from the very top.
Now, I will have to say, I did say this video, as people, longtime listeners will know, I don't oftentimes talk about politicians very much. Why is that? Because politicians are a lagging indicator. No politician says anything unless it's already popular. I was very impressed at the tack that Ossoff was taking. I think, especially given that he is up for election in a very vulnerable seat in Georgia, I think it is a very, very interesting that he's taking such an overt tack. And I think it's interesting that, you know, people, and especially referencing the Klan in the South, that's something a lot of people are aware of. Either they've experienced it or they have it in their family. The reaction and the comments were very interesting because there's the courage to call Trump out as a Klansman is a seriously presidential level of the Democrats. Please take note. I think one of the things people are definitely wishing the Democrats were more.
You're seeing what I'm seeing, right?
Were more forward about is really, defending their position, attacking the other side, going on the attack, all this type of thing. That, and I think the base wants that. They want a political party with teeth. They want a resistance with teeth. And that and Ossoff in this kind of moment is offering that type of thing. Hence why I think, with the reaction, and even over on Aaron Rupar, the reaction is the same, sort of thing. It's a very scary and frightening thing. I'm not going to show a picture of the terrible thing Trump posted. I have standards. But it is a bit disturbing, but I'm also, none of us should be surprised. Trump's career in politics started with birtherism. It started with him amplifying the, at the time, rather fringe idea that Obama was not born in the United States. And Donald Trump went on multiple national TV shows and talk shows. Who booked him, by the way? Their fault for doing this, because they booked him. But Trump's good for ratings, so and started promoting these things and started promoting this idea. And that then led to Obama making fun of him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and my personal headcanon is that that's when Trump decided to run for president. Now we know from the Epstein files, it probably had nothing to do with that, and there was a whole other plan afoot. But that's my headcanon, is that Trump is just that petty sort of thing. So honestly, we shouldn't be surprised that Trump would post a, primate depiction of the Obamas like a Klansman, because that was the root of the problem to begin with. But I do love Ossoff calling it out for what it is. And it is, and obviously he's gotten the right reaction from Democrats and other people and all this sort of thing. And the comments are absolutely full, full of this. But yeah, it's not a great post. And as I was telling someone this afternoon, half of Trump's issue is messaging. He just says stuff that puts people off. This is a holdover Epstein tab that and we have Steven Pinker too. Oh my god, this goes so far. I love this video because it really gets into, and the Steven Pinker thing is weird too. That's not important. That's the CEO Barclays letter. And I do want to get into the election stuff, and we have a limited time. Okay, let's prioritize. Let's watch this video here, and then we'll skip the next one, and we'll get into some of the other headlines, because there's a very important stuff happening in Georgia, and we do have to talk about it. But we're gonna watch this first, because I do believe the Epstein scandal does kind of keep going in a pernicious way that that is quite dangerous, and that's worth talking about. So hang on, let's go. Here we go.
And by the way, I think historically, when we look back at the Epstein scandal, it's going to be bigger than Watergate, and it's going to be, by the way, the president didn't go to jail, the attorney general did. It's going to be bigger than Iran-Contra, and here's why. It spans 4 administrations. It's deeper than any political thing on the surface. And so I think in terms of the number of people who are affected, I mean, how many people were affected by Iran-Contra, okay, or Watergate? I mean, specifically in that instance. Obviously, everybody's affected when there's a lack of transparency and bad or fraudulent things happening. But I mean, directly affected or implicated, that was a finite group of people in both of those. Here we have what seems to be almost an infinite number of people involved with Jeffrey Epstein. At least we don't even know yet how many there were in the criminal enterprise or the seedy part of it. And it's like that Spider-Man meme where there's 6 Spider-Men, they all look the same and they're pointing at each other. You've got all these billionaires pointing at each other. You're in the Epstein. No, you're in the Epstein. No, you are in the Epstein. It's you who is in the Epstein files. And you're the one who went to the island. I didn't go to the island. Anyways, there's sort of this circular finger pointing that's going on. But I think it's a scandal that is longer in time, involved multiple administrations, and that's why we have to get to the bottom of it.
When I came across that kind of randomly, and someone was asking about the Obama video, but was it the end of a screen recording though? Yes, it was part of a video, and it was screen recorded and then posted to Truth Social. So yeah, it was, there was other, it was part of a whole video. I think, is like Oprah was depicted as a hippo, Joe Biden was depicted as a baboon. Yeah, I think the thing I think it's important to remember about that is there's a very explicit and uncomfortable history with Black people being depicted as monkeys or called porch monkeys, all this type of thing. And so when that sort of thing happens, or that sort of depiction is made, even like, not in the case of any Black person, but especially, a political figure, whatever have you, that there's going to be some people who are unhappy with that depiction, because there is a history of a very negative aspect of that. Do I mind that it was made? No. Do I mind that it exists? Absolutely no. There's far worse stuff about the Obamas exists all this type of thing. But I think it's also important to remember it's being posted on social media by the President of the United States. And that's, if it's Nick Fuentes that posts it, who cares? We know what to expect. That's a much tougher pill to swallow when it's a head of state sort of thing. It's, yeah, I understand the racial history. For those who don't, they appreciate the info. Literally, there's 10 other people, though, depicted. They're only showing the racist thing. Well, I think there's a reason for that sort of thing. One, obviously, it serves an agenda. And what do we always say? Say it with me now. News is a narrative. That's why they call it a story. It's, yeah, I mean, there's, yeah, I mean, that's, no, and it's not the whole video, because it was a screenshot to start with sort of thing. Again, there's just some uncomfortable history there. But here's the thing. It's low-hanging, that type of thing. This is what I would call an unforced error. These are the type of things that something happens, whatever have you, and the conversation shifts away from whatever it was that video was made about to the racist moment or the sexist moment or whatever have you. Because one, it's low-hanging fruit. Two, it causes a moral outrage. Three, it usually serves an agenda. And four, nothing actionable comes of it. That's half the issue with identity politics. Nothing actionable ever comes from it. And so you would just end up saying a lot of stuff back and forth, but nothing ever changes. Like, in terms of nothing policy-wise is going to shift based upon that. However, I think from a messaging point of view for the Trump White House, these unforced errors cause them more problems than they help. It gets the conversation going in a way that's not terribly helpful for trying to achieve their policy goals, such as they are. And that is, exactly, it's not the thing, it's how we're talking about the thing. Yes, it's the same problem. And this is where some messaging discipline would be helpful. Now, personally, at a very personal level, we'll do a little bit of editorializing for a moment. At a personal level, I don't love that the leader of my country is posting screenshots of such things. I'm also not a huge fan of whoever made the video to start with. Although Oprah is a hippo is kind of funny. I'm not a huge fan of this sort of thing, but I'm also not a huge fan that this is getting posted on social media by the leader of my country. And again, sometimes it matters not what's being said, but who said it. That also is important. And that's where, when that type of thing happens, you get like speeches like we just watched from Ossoff about what that means and the implications of it. And that is a big problem, and one of the unforced errors for the Trump people that just turns people off and turns people away. And there's a lot of people who I think would be more supportive if the messaging weren't as caustic. However, that's a big part of the Trump brand. And for those that feel like thank God someone in power and privilege is finally saying the things we've always wanted to say, posting things that we always wanted to post, lampooning the right people, all this type of thing. Interestingly enough, I don't think that's ever going away from American politics ever again. That will be politics from now on, in terms of, just absolute, crazy things said about either side. I think culturally we're going to have to get used to that and not take it as seriously, which is kind of true in the rest of the world to some degree. and change how we think about this stuff, because right now we're taking all of this very seriously. Well, some of us are taking this very seriously, and we probably shouldn't. That's the dumb part, is we probably shouldn't. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but let's move on. I do want to stop by Steven Pinker for a moment. So Steven Pinker, if you don't know, is a professor at Harvard, somewhere in the Ivy League. And much like Noam Chomsky, has an Epstein connection and is an academic. And it says here that Steven Pinker is the academic who wrote The Better Angels of Our Nature, in which he argued that violence, war, and depravity are occurring less now than they used to. He's the John Stone Family Professor of Psychology at Harvard University. I knew it was Harvard. Many are mentioned in the files, not all are guilty, but a red flag went up when I watched an interview from 2019 with Pinker in which he stated, quote, "I couldn't stand him," unquote, and, quote, "even before his sexual crimes came out, I thought he was a bullshitter," unquote. Except this didn't make sense because I'd already done a soft dive into Pinker in the files, where I found over a dozen photos, numerous events he attended, and a number of times he was ecstatic to meet up with Jeffrey Epstein. After spending more time on the files involving Pinker, I shockingly discovered that not only did Pinker join Epstein's defense team in 2006, he advised him 1 year later when he asked about the legality of transporting minors. This didn't throw your red flag, Pinker? Side note, Lawrence Krauss, who helped organize and attend Epstein-funded scientific conferences and publicly came to Epstein's defense, apparently thought Pinker was cute. After Jeffrey Epstein was indicted for sex crimes in 2006, his Harvard lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, who was also one of the O.J. Simpson lawyers, called in the expertise of one of his Harvard colleagues, Steven Pinker. A document from Epstein's legal defense shows that Pinker weighed in on the precise meaning of a federal law about using the internet to entice minors into prostitution or other illegal sex acts. You may ask, quote, so Pinker definitely stopped contacting Epstein after this, right? No! Records showed that Pinker continued to pal around with Epstein for years afterwards. According to the emails I put over for hours, he attended events in 2009, 2011, 2013, 2014, and continued on until 2019. This included conferences, gala dinners, discussion panels, and workshops. Research shows that Pinker's wording, quote, interpretation letter, unquote, was part of the broader defense strategy that helped lead to Epstein's 2008 plea deal, in which he avoided the more serious federal sex trafficking charges, pleaded guilty to lesser state counts, and received a comparatively lenient sentence. Pinker did that. Do not let this man BS you. He didn't end up in a photo because his colleagues were powsy-wowsy with him. He was complicit, he knew what was going on, and he continued the relationship because there was something in it for him. Yeah. Oh, and apparently tons of donations. Just tons and tons and tons of donations of various and sundry amounts. 500, 250, 350, all this type of thing. So, yeah, it's, and there's the letters and the receipts and all this sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, you know, don't know what Pinker did in terms of actual crimes, or anything like that.
Or they
Shut up. Actual crimes or anything like that. But it was definitely, you know, it's definitely not going to be, I think it's going to be very tough times for him in academia, and people are not going to want to associate with him because of this. But I mean, again, the point of this is it just keeps going. It keeps going no matter how far you go. It just gets crazier. It just gets crazier. Now, we're going to stop this. I've been hanging on to this for a couple weeks and we just have never ever gotten to it. And I'm going to get to it now. There was a hearing. I hate congressional hearings, but there was a hearing with Jack Smith regarding the slate of fake electors Trump tried to, with Trump's knowledge, was prepared by state Republicans in certain states to send fake electors to the Electoral College in 2020 to change the win from Biden to Trump at the Electoral College. Jack Smith has investigated this, and his investigation did not conclude in time enough for any prosecution to have taken place. But he has all the evidence, and so there was a hearing discussing all of this, and I knew about the fake electors scandal at the time. It was quite shocking. It was discovered at the state level by state officials, and there is definitive indications that Trump knew about this attempt. In light of the seizure of Georgia ballots and ballot containers from the 2020 election from Fulton County. This is very interesting, and so we're going to watch this short clip of Pramila Jayapal here on the bottom and Jack Smith here at the top, going back and forth. Now, because Pramila Jayapal is a Democrat and this serves the Democrat narrative, this back and forth will be very quick. Most congressional hearings are not this tight, but here we go.
Did your investigation find that Donald Trump attempted to manufacture fraudulent state slates of presidential electors in 7 states that he lost?
Yes.
Did he pressure state officials to ignore true vote counts in those states?
Yes.
Did he spread lies and conspiracies to his followers to make them believe that the election had been illegally rigged against him?
Yes.
Did he pressure DOJ officials to stop the certification of the election?
He did.
Did he pressure his own vice president, Mike Pence, to stop the certification against the oath of office that he had sworn to the Constitution?
He did.
And when all of this didn't work, did he, Donald Trump, motivate and inspire an angry mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the certification?
Our proof showed that he caused what happened on January 6th, that it was foreseeable, and that he exploited that violence.
Did Donald Trump know that his allegations of election fraud were lies when he spread them?
Our proof was that he did, and we intended to prove that at trial.
Mr. Smith, if your case had gone to trial, would the evidence from Georgia have helped prove that President Trump knowingly engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election?
Yes. After an investigation following the facts and the law, we believed we had proof beyond a reasonable doubt to prove those charges. Rather than accept his defeat in the 2020 election, President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results and prevent the lawful transfer of power. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in criminal activity. We followed the facts and we followed the law. Where that led us was to an indictment of an unprecedented criminal scheme to block the peaceful transfer of power. But you are correct that the only person charged in this case was Donald Trump, who, in my estimation, was the person most culpable for the crimes charged.
I mean, that's a lot. Now, again, I hate congressional hearings because they're for show. No actual information of any value is rarely ever said at them. That's why I don't watch them. If anything important happens, there'll be highlights. I'll watch it later. I'll see it on social media, whatever have you. Or if I get that curious, I'll go find it myself. This one I bring up only because we're going to get into the seizure of ballots in Georgia from Fulton County, specifically Fulton County, which is part of Atlanta. And this, in light of that, it is interesting that we have Jack Smith out here talking about the evidence that was gathered about what happened in the 2020 election in the midst of this happening. And so I wanted to have that as background, that Jack Smith, as prosecutor, is here out now under oath in congressional testimony going on about the issues with 2020 and who was responsible and why. Oh yes, that's the Chinese biolab. We're not going to do that right now. That's a whole other thing. Good Lord. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. I swear. So then that leads to the marquee story in Georgia. Trump had an unusual call with FBI agents after election center search. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, brokered the call, and President Trump directly questioned frontline agents on the inquiry, the Times has learned. It says here, by any measure, the FBI search of an election center in Fulton County, Georgia last week was extraordinary. Agents seized truckloads of 2020 ballots as President Trump harnessed the levers of government to not only buttress his false claims of widespread voter fraud, but also to try to build a criminal case against those he believes wronged him. What happened the next day was in some ways even more unusual, the New York Times has learned. Behind closed doors, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, met with some of the same FBI agents, members of the Chief Bureau's field office in Atlanta, which is conducting the election inquiry. 3 people with knowledge of the meeting said. They could not say why Miss Gabbard, who also appeared on site at the search, was there, but her continued presence has raised eyebrows given that her role overseeing the nation's intelligence agencies does not include on-site involvement in criminal investigative work. What occurred during the meeting was even further outside the bounds of normal law enforcement procedure. Ms. Gabbard used her cell phone to call Mr. Trump, who did not initially pick up, but called back shortly after, the People said. The president addressed the agents on speakerphone, asking them questions as well as praising and thanking them for their work on the inquiry, the People said. The supervisor of the squad, which investigates allegations of public corruption and civil rights violations, developed the evidence for the search, primarily fielded Mr. Trump's queries. The People said one U.S. official said the call was fairly short, perhaps just a minute long, and compared the conversation to a pep rally or a coach giving an encouraging halftime speech to his players. That person said the president gave no substantive direction to the investigators. In a letter to lawmakers who were pressing for more details, Ms. Gabbard denied that Mr. Trump asked questions or issued directives during the call. Mr. Trump personally ordered Ms. Gabbard to go to Atlanta for the search and coordinated her actions with Andrew Bailey, one of 2 deputy FBI directors, according to the U.S. official. Even for a president who has radically transformed the Justice Department and the FBI by trampling over their political independence and using them as tools for personal retribution, Mr. Trump appears to be taking that kind of involvement to a new level. Rather than going to senior department or FBI officials, Mr. Trump spoke directly to the frontline agents doing the granular work of a politically sensitive investigation which he has a large personal stake. A White House spokesman, Davis Ingle, defended the administration's efforts in Georgia. Quote, President Trump pledged to secure America's elections, and he has tasked the most talented team of patriots to do just that, Mr. Ingle said, adding, quote, President Trump has full confidence in his entire team. Olivia C. Coleman, a spokeswoman for Ms. Gabbard, said the Director of National Intelligence had a, quote, vital role, unquote, in protecting critical infrastructure and analyzing intelligence related to election security. Quote, President Trump's directive to secure our elections was clear, and DNI Gabbard has and will proudly continue to take actions within her authorities alongside our interagency partners, including the FBI, to support ensuring the integrity of our elections, she said. A spokesperson for the Justice Department declined to comment, and the FBI declined to comment on an open investigation. And then it wraps up with the "it's highly unusual" sort of thing, which it is. And that we will find out more about that as time goes on and what the result of that is. But given we have Jack Smith's investigation, we have Trump looking at ballots in Georgia, an election that was recounted 3 times because it was too close for several races that year, that was ran by Republican Brian Kemp. We remember the phone call, Brian, find me 11,780 votes, and Brian's like, no, that's not how elections work. Given all of that, and now we have Tulsi Gabbard, who carried the 2020 election fraud claims, almost as good as Trump, all those years and all this sort of thing. Having her there, we'll find out more about those ballots. However, and I had this last week, didn't get to it, from the Wall Street Journal, there is an interesting fact about Tulsi Gabbard that I think is interesting. We'll find out more about ballots in Georgia, but it says here, a U.S. intelligence official has alleged wrongdoing by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard in a whistleblower complaint that is so highly classified it has sparked months of wrangling over how to share it with Congress, according to U.S. officials and others familiar with the matter. It says here that it says a cloak and dagger mystery reminiscent of a John le Carre novel is swirling around the complaint, which is said to be locked in a safe. Disclosure of its contents could, quote, cause grave damage to national security. Shut up. National security, one official said. It also implicates another federal agency beyond Gabbard's and raises potential claims of executive privilege that may involve the White House. The complaint was filed last May with the Intelligence Community's Inspector General, according to a November letter that the whistleblower's lawyer addressed to Gabbard. The letter, which was reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, accused Gabbard's office of hindering the dissemination of the complaint to lawmakers by failing to provide the necessary security guidance on how to do so. That is some quite interesting in light of the Georgia situation and what that means, and what is that complaint? It's so bad they don't know how to tell Congress. A lot of questions. All of this raises a lot of very interesting questions that dollars will get us donuts we'll never probably find out all about. But it raises some very interesting and uncomfortable questions. I'll keep an eye on that story for everybody. We'll save Gaza for next week. It's not going anywhere. And I think we'll also say, well, we'll do this quickly. So this is fun. I forgot to change the graphic. This is rather fun. So there was a Chinese biolab. No one's really talking about this. There was a Chinese biolab in Nevada, and it was discovered, uncovered, and it was operating in a residential neighborhood. It says an Israeli man, Ori Solomon, was arrested by the FBI after it was discovered that while on a visa in the U.S., he operated a biolab tied to the CCP containing biological weapons such as HIV, tuberculosis, and the deadliest form of malaria. I also found out from who has the story, the Washington Times, that apparently the whole thing came apart because two people got ill in the garage because they were also using their biolab home as an Airbnb. It's an illegal. This person describes it as an illegal Israeli CCP bioweapon lab in Nevada. Was only uncovered because the Israeli guy who owned the house was trying to squeeze a couple extra shekels out of the operation by renting out the space as an Airbnb. And that was from the Washington Times. That was found a refrigerator that was labeled Ebola. Highly pathogenic agents. Inspectors found Chinese nationals in the lab who were running experiments on mice that were genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus. Also, given what we know about China and COVID, this is a huge problem. I mean, I guess, thank goodness the FBI was Johnny on top of it. But yeah, it's... this is in no way to store, keep, or operate these things. And it is rather entertaining that this all came apart because they were renting it out as an Airbnb. Maybe don't invite the public to your secret biolab where you're apparently building bioweapons to wipe out people or cause societal collapse or whatever have you. Yes, it became deathly ill or bedridden for days. So yeah, it's a very interesting story. There's not much more info about it, and it's not really being covered, so we might not learn any more about it, but definitely frightening. And given what we know about the lab situation with China and COVID-19 and everything, it's even kind of more frightening to think about what the implications of that could be for just life and anything else. I'm not going to play it because it's kind of long, but someone did just send me a video about them about Ro Khanna and Bob Massey reviewing unredacted Epstein files, and I will watch that later. But if I find anything interesting, I'll report it back here next week. So, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I've done an appearance today and a recording and this show and gotten much stuff done. I am ready to wash makeup off my face that I've had on since 9 o'clock this morning, get in some comfier clothes, sit down, and relax. So, my name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Please catch me online at Cameron Cowan on Twitter and Instagram, and at Cameron Journal on TikTok, Cameron L. Cowan on Facebook, and you can find all those links at CameronJournal.com. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter, CameronJournal.substack.com, and I will see you on Wednesday for The Living Joke with Will and Connor. I don't know what we're going to talk about yet, because we have not had production, but it's going to be fun. And I'll see you guys back here next Monday for the Cameron Journal Newshour. The interview today is with an author called The Paraclete, who wrote a book about the modern citizen, and we have some other fun stuff with interviews this week. The other interview this week is a fiction interview with author Henry Sullivan, who's also a Substacker. So make sure to subscribe on YouTube at Cameron Journal for that, and I will see you next Monday, everyone. Have a great night. Bye-bye now.